Good afternoon and welcome to session 2. I'm Spencer Rule from Cerity Partners and your workshop host for today. I'm here to introduce you to the workshop leaders. This workshop is titled Widening the Path, Expanding Credibility and Opportunity in ETA. They didn't give me that. Reed told me it's different now. All good. I'd like to introduce you today to Craig Cook, Chairman and CEO at Peterson Manufacturing, Anna Day, multi-unit owner of Clean Eats, Mentor, and Westlake, Larry Fulton, founder and managing principal of Fulton Equity, and Reed Tileson, ETA entrepreneur and ETA professor here at Case and at BYU. With that, I'll hand it over to Reed.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hey, first and foremost, it's 2 o'clock. It's afternoon time. Everyone's probably tired after lunch and everything, but give yourselves a round of applause for making it this far in the day. I can promise you that this event will end well, so the best is yet to come. We're going to do 2 things here. We're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about credibility theory or credibility signaling theory and all that good stuff. Then after that, we're going to bring up 3 panelists and have a panel discussion around that. Core guidelines for today is that it's highly interactive. So if you have a question, a comment, something that's on your mind, if, Brian, you completely disagree with something that I say, totally fine. Participate. I do ask, though, that if you do ask questions, because we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time, make them concise, make them quick. We're going to talk today about how to understand essentially why business sellers choose certain buyers, and we're going to go into a little bit of academic work around signaling theory and how to signal credibility. A little bit about me. I'm a practitioner at my core. I bought and sold a number of companies. I currently invest in ETA deals, mainly self-funded ones. I serve on a couple of boards. Outside of that, I do doctoral level research as a PhD student on entrepreneurship through acquisition. It is what I do. I interview people of various outcomes, good outcomes, bad outcomes, acquired, not acquired, analyze transactions, and been doing this essentially as a quasi full-time gig for the last couple of years. All right, so the agenda. I'm going to talk about this thing called signaling theory. We're going to look at it from the seller perspective and the buyer perspective. We're going to have our panel, talk about some key takeaways, and go from there. The core issue that I want to discuss today is the challenge of how you show what your values are as either a buyer or a seller as part of a transaction in the ultimate endeavor to effectively tell a story and to build credibility and to ultimately, as either a buyer or a seller, to figure out what it is that you want to get out of the transaction. All right, so we're going to start with signaling theory. Who here has heard of signaling theory by chance? All right, Craig, 1 is probably when we were doing our prep call a week ago. So essentially, we'll take a 1-minute tangent here. It's a reason that many of us choose to go to school. What he showed is that education is a signal that we're going to be good employees. So essentially, you don't know when you hire someone. If you're a business owner or a CEO, you're a hiring manager, you don't know if someone's going to be a good team member or not. It's a lot of informational asymmetry, and he showed that by having an education, it signals to potential employers that you're going to be good, there's someone that you should get hired, and you're going to be a great team member. And in 1973, he actually won a Nobel Prize for this in economics, and one of the cool applications of it. Who here has gone to a used car lot and seen something priced at like $1,576 and wondered why they priced it that way? Anyone had that experience? Yeah. So signaling theory shows, for example, that if you price something with odd numbers like that, it signals that you're not likely to negotiate on price. Whereas if you do a round number like 15,000 flat, it sends a signal that you're open to price negotiations. So an interesting application of this here. Think about it from a seller perspective. We're going to do a quick exercise here, and where this comes from is we did some research where we talked to individuals that were selling companies, and we talked to individuals that were buying companies, and we went through various scenarios, and we figured out what the other counterparty thought when one of the parties said something. So in the case of sellers, one signal a seller sends is the fact that they're actually selling the business, right? That in of itself has a lot of information. Another one is if the seller wants all cash. Another one is the seller saying, I care about my employees. Another one saying, I do not want the highest price. So a seller says that. As a buyer, when you hear all cash, what does that signal to you? What'd you say? That they don't want to be around, right? What else could that signal to you? There's something wrong with the business, right? Absolutely. So seller says that, and what does a buyer hear? Well, the fact you're selling, it's a good thing. It means it's an opportunity for them. Not a whole lot of complexity there. All cash. What do sellers say? Ooh, they want all cash. It means that they're hiding something. I care about my employees. I thought this one was fascinating. That means, you know what? They're likely to accept a lower price. And of course, fourth, I want the highest price. That one shows to buyers that the seller is principled. There's values in their business. Anything resonate with people on that slide? Anything surprising about it? Put yourself in a seller's shoes. If you say, I care about my employees, a buyer hears, oh, that means they can get a lower price. So interesting stuff to think about there. Let's look at it from a seller standpoint. If a buyer, from a seller standpoint, most common theme of what individual sellers look for when they sell a business is a buyer they can trust with the business. It's not price. It's not the fact that the seller or the buyer both went to Case Western. It is, are they able to effectively run the business and essentially maintain the business and maintain the legacy going forward. And it's also not based on the finances. And the most common test that sellers do to think through that is literally visualizing, is this person someone who can actually run this business post-close? So when you think about signals to send, things to think about, how you want to come across, keep in mind that that is the main theme based on a fair amount of research over the last couple of years that sellers actually look for in a buyer. How does that resonate with people? Anyone experience that in a transaction?
Yeah.
Yeah? Say more, Mike.
That's what I cared about. When I sold my company, I cared about the employees, and it did mean I would take less to land them well, but I wanted to see if somebody could actually be a steward.
Right. And successful sellers, all right, those that are satisfied with their transactions tend to take a very intentional path like that where they know what matters to them and they don't always go for the highest price on the transactions. Great. All right. Let's look at it from a buyer perspective now. What signals of what a buyer does, how do those come across to a seller? So one is the fact that someone who is a non-owner operator, it's their first time searching, what kind of signal does that send? Second is, who here is looking at doing SBA financing? Yeah, I love SBA financing. There's plenty of lenders here. Some of them are in the room, like good old Steve back there, one of my favorites. By the way, if he closes a deal, he'd pay me a referral fee. But just so you know, if he ever did that, I'd just give it back to you as working capital. We're intrinsically motivated up here. With that said, if you're doing SBA, what kind of signal does that send? If you say, Brian or Mike, I want to maintain your legacy, right? When you say that, what does the seller actually hear? Another one is if you come in and say, hey, my name's Vince, I'm gonna go all cash, baby. What does that signal does that send? So what do you think for SBA? What do sellers hear if you say you want to use SBA? What signal does it send to them? Don't have funding, all right.
It's gonna take some time.
It's going to take some time. Give it up for Mr. Fulton right there. That's the right one. Of course, Larry, you should have gotten that right because you were an SBA guy back in your day. So you know. What about all cash? What does that signal? If you're a buyer and you say, Dwayne, I'm paying you all cash for the business. What'd you say? Yeah, it shows you I got some money, right? What else could it show? Move quick, right? So here's what we say. The fact that you're a non-owner operator searching, business sellers find this as a signal that you're ambitious, right? You're a go-getter. You want to take things on. SBA, Larry got it right. That signals, oh, this transaction's going to be delayed, right? It's going to be more complex than it needs to. And to be clear, these things send a lot of signals. I'm showing you what the top one was based on the research. Maintain legacy. I like this one. Signal is that it means you're cash poor, right? It means you're trying to compensate for the fact that you don't have the liquidity necessary to close the deal, so you want to have a lower price. All cash, highest sign of credibility. Sellers, owners, right? We're all human. Someone going in and saying, I will pay all cash for your business, huge leg up. Whether or not you follow through with it as a buyer is one thing, but a great way to get a seller's attention is to at least offer that. Questions, comments, thoughts, things that resonate here? Any surprises? Yeah.
This kind of sounds like the housing market. You want to get a certain type of loan, it's going to slow closing, an all-cash offer, let's get it done. We're going to keep the house the way you had it. Means you're going to offer less. First-time home buyer. It's ambitious, but making you nervous about it.
Yeah.
Some parallels there.
Yeah, absolutely. Buying and selling businesses, buying and selling houses, right? A lot of parallels to it. Sourcing, there's plenty of parallels to dating as well, because at the end of the day, it's like two human beings that are doing these things. And what's so interesting is that what I'm showing you here is literally from one buyer, what one buyer thought they were saying, and what a seller actually heard, and what a seller thought they were saying, and what a buyer actually interpreted. The informational asymmetries are out of this world in these relationships, and I'd argue in a lot of relationships out there as well. So great point, Matthew. Give it up for him for a nice, insightful comment. I'm a clapper at my core in case you can't tell. Other thoughts, things that resonate? Yes.
Is there a way to reframe maintain legacy that's perceived positively?
Who thinks, what would be a better way to say it?
Start with all cash and then say.
Yes, you got it. Now you can kind of see how it's all about, you're not changing your story or what you want to do, but you want to get their attention, you want to pique their interest, you want to show that you're credible, right? Again, think back to how do you signal in the 70s to that employer that you're going to be a good employee? You get an education. How do you signal to a seller that you're the right buyer? I would argue this research shows, just say, first and foremost, I want to offer you all cash for the business. You don't have to mention that it's going to be with SBA financing, right? But whatever gets their attention to send a signal that you're a credible buyer, critical part of the ball game here. All right, beautiful. Yeah, Steve, one more, then we'll go.
Question about the all cash. Of course, that's going to be extremely attractive to a lot of sellers. However, could it be the wrong signal to maybe the wrong seller to where they would view it as just a cog in your wheel and you're not going to really care about the business as much because you got a ton of cash?
Absolutely, it could be. And a lot of this is qualifying what the seller wants, what their utility points are, what actually matters. So there's a great point to be said for that part of it as well. With that said, I think there's some generalizable rules that you can take away as you go forward with it. Because at the end of the day, business sellers, business buyers, we're all people with emotions. All right. FYI, most common theme among buyers, we all talk about recurring revenue, fragmented industries, all those ETA criteria, which are very important. But when you actually talk to business buyers, what you find is that stable technology and opportunities to grow the business through sales are things that buyers matter. So those of you that own businesses or advisors or are working with sellers, interesting data points there. People fear AI. They fear technology change, especially when they're signing up for one of Steve's 10-year personally guaranteed loans. So an FYI to keep in mind there. And ultimately, the test that they do to figure this out is, can they replicate and do more than the current owner is doing? So things to keep in mind. All right, that's enough for me chatting for right now. I want to invite up our panel, and we're going to see what they have to say about choosing buyers. Let's give them a round of applause. All right. Being the active-oriented group they are, they're going to stand for this. So my ask is a quick 30-second introduction, and let's have fun with it. Tell us one thing that your family would say about you if they were here. And let's kick it off with you, Anna, and then Larry, and then Craig.
Hi, guys. My name's Anna Day. I'm based out of Mentor, Kirtland Hills, Ohio, so very close. Nice 30-minute drive, a little bit quicker commute than Craig got today. I got started in entrepreneurship about 15 years ago with an Anytime Fitness franchise. Started in an owner-operator capacity, ended up selling that, but prior to that sale, I opened a few Clean Eats healthy meal plan franchises on each side of Cleveland. Also opened multiple Smoothie King standalone drive-through franchises, was a partner on 3 Barrio Taco and Tequila franchises, opened a Vitamin Shop franchise, an independent bar in downtown Willoughby called The Yard on 3rd, which I have since successfully exited after just 2 years. And I'm a GoGlow, a multi-unit beauty franchise owner as well in Mentor and Rocky River, Ohio. And then my claim to fame, I started a charity event called the 24 and 24. We've raised over $3 million since I started it 11 years ago for children battling life-threatening illnesses. And my family would say I don't stop talking. So with that, Larry.
I think they are on their game with that one right there. And as you can see, she has not done very much with her life. So give it up for Anna for being here.
All right. Larry Fulton. I own Fulton Equity, which is my family's investment vehicle. We buy controlling interests in lower middle market companies. So those are businesses with at least $1 million in EBITDA. However, I will do $500,000, but I really wouldn't do less than that. So I've been doing this for 20 years. And so before that, I got my undergrad degree from Florida A&M University. I've got my MBA right here at the Weatherhead School of Management. Spent about 14 years in corporate. And during that 14-year period, my claim to fame really is I took the lowest paying job so that I can be here in Cleveland and start saving for my acquisition journey years later. And it took me quite a while, but I did that. And when I did my first acquisition in 2003, I had a nice nest egg at that point. But I bought an Amish pallet manufacturing business in Middlefield, Ohio. I could have bought, anything else, but I chose that for a variety of different reasons. I did that deal in 2003. 2005, I was able to go out and buy a wood crating company. 2008, I wound up buying an add-on business, and I did a joint venture with this company called Worthington Industries down in Columbus. And then I bought a fiberglass manufacturing business. We did a startup with the state of Ohio.
All right, Larry, come on. We'll get there. We'll get there.
COVID, and then I had a number of exits. And so my last acquisition was in March of this year, and I'm looking very actively on another couple of acquisition opportunities. So. And
your family, what would they say about you?
Definitely analytical.
Analytical. I'll back that right there. Cool. Craig.
I'm Craig Cook. My path has been more long-term with different organizations. I went to Muskingum College for undergrad. I went to Case for law school, and I got an MBA at Baldwin-Wallace. Practiced law for a while, kind of got sick of it. I enjoyed the firm I was with. I loved it, but I didn't love litigation. I was fascinated with business once I got to my MBA, and a partner and I we bought a bunch of junk, I feel like, but it was essentially a startup. Back in 1995, it was a machine shop. However, we had a plan to get into a certain kind of machining that was kind of blowing up at that time and has over the years, a company called Precision Production. It's located in Strongsville. We built it up. We moved a couple times to our Strongsville location. In 2019, we sold it to private equity. Most of my experience with buyers was with private equity. However, I looked at different types of buyers a little bit early on. After we sold it, we were young. We stayed on. I stayed as CEO. I left as CEO in 23. He recently left as president this past year. We did do an acquisition in 21 of another manufacturing company in Chicago that it was a turnaround. We assimilated it in our company. We shut it down. We did an industrial auction. So I've been through that aspect of it as well. And it ultimately was a positive experience because we got a good deal on it.
Great.
In terms of my family would tell me I'm terrible at flipping pancakes.
That's a good, fascinating fact right there.
Thank
All
you.
right, let's dive into it. So, Larry, you've obviously sold companies, you've bought companies, you're actively searching right now. In the companies you sold, how did you choose the buyer?
Interesting. So the first company I sold, Lefco Worthington, I went through the normal channels. I contacted a broker, and very quickly I said, this is not the path for me. And I was looking for a buyer with a lot of integrity, a lot of experience, a lot of cash, because I too wanted legacy as a seller. And so that was really important to me. I wound up just through networking, found a buyout fund that bought my company as a normal transaction and then turned the business into an employee-owned organization. And so that was really important for me. It was important for the employees. And just real quickly, the one point I would add is during the transaction, which is normally not typical, is I thought it would be important for my lead C-suite people to know the buyer and the buyer to know them, because I was really not operating the business. And so I invited the buyer to come meet the management team. And that really helped put fuel to the fire and added that transaction. The next deal that I wound up doing was a fiberglass manufacturing business. And I didn't go the normal routes. I said, look, I know my buyer. I was really specific in terms of the type of buyer I thought would make a lot of sense. It was one of my competitors. And so I went directly to him and I said, look, I'm going to get out. This is a great opportunity for you to get in. And we did the deal. So
Now let me ask you this. You talked about the term legacy. If you had to choose between legacy and money, how do you think about those two things? How would you balance them out?
You know me, I know the value of the businesses, quite frankly. And so I'm going to hit my valuation number. But I also want to make sure that the buyer has cash, that the buyer, understands how to operate the business. They're coming in, they're not going to carve that business up, and they're going to do the right thing with my employees. That for me is really important. And then, by the way, I love to understand and see, advertisements or marketing publications with the companies that I have founded. I would just love to see that. So.
Nice. Now, Craig.
Yes.
Larry was very intentional about the kind of buyers he went out to, but in your case, the buyer approached you. Can you walk us through that?
Well, the buyers, we decided it was an interesting time. If you remember 2018, 2019, the economy was going crazy. It was pre-COVID. We were debt-free, and we just decided we're young, we can stay on, let's go do it. And so we actually first approached our accountant, who brought some semi-strategic potential buyers in. And the one thing in my business in manufacturing is you're never going to get what you would get if you actually took it to market and went with private equity versus a strategic buyer, especially if it's another company that's going to bolt you on. Mm-hmm. You're just not going to get the same multiple. So we went back and forth with our accounting firm. It was Pease and Associates, a guy named Joe Pease, who's a great guy. He ultimately said, hey, guys, if you really want to get this done, you got to take it to market. So we ultimately hired an investment advisor, Signet Capital Advisors, to rep us in the deal. They went out and they found potential. They were all private equity buyers, but we probably met with like 8 different ones. We got maybe 5 different offers. We picked the offer we picked, got us the most cash on day one. They also had a plan where they wanted us to become a platform to buy other companies. And they were happy that we were staying on. Most buyers like that aren't looking to cut you up, especially if you don't have, they're going to make it a leverage buyout. They're going to add debt if you have no debt at the point of sale. But they're not out there, I think for the size businesses we're talking about, it's not going to be an RJR Nabisco type situation with KKR coming in and slicing and dicing it. That's typical. We ran too lean to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's typical.
We're way past the 1980s now.
Yeah, we are.
25.
Yes,
maybe.
we are. So that's how we went about it. That's how we got the deal done. We ultimately sold to a PE firm that morphed into a family office. They no longer, but now that we're we did an acquisition. I left. I'm running a business down in Florida for another PE firm that I'm trying to turn around a little bit, develop sales, different type of business, but. That's how we did it to find our buyers. So our buyers were seasoned. They were not manufacturing people necessarily. They really were investors, and that's the big difference with PE. I mean, they're going to look at you. It's like they're owning stock in you, and they relied on us. They left us alone as long as we made numbers, and that's how it went.
Great. Mm-hmm. Anna, I'm sure you're dying to add something here. You've had a lot of transactional experience more with Main Street businesses. Can you walk through some of the ways that you thought about who the right buyers were?
Yeah, and as I was your question, hey, how do I change the verbiage of maintain legacy to a positive instead of a signal theory negative to the seller, right? That resonated with me that you asked that, because I think what the underlying intent in asking that question is for probably a lot of people in this room is, What if I don't have cash? Like, great. Signaling theory says if I have all cash, they're going to like me. Great, I don't have the cash. So that not overly helpful, right? And I'm sure that's probably applicable to some people in this room. So I want to just kind of come at it from that angle. I think it's the most helpful thing I can potentially share. Some sellers have ego. Some sellers have passion to the business. Some sellers have both. I looked at selling. Sometimes I sell because I'm tired. Like I'm just like, all right, I'm just kind of tired. And my accountant will actually say, like, bad idea to sell right now. Like when we look at what you put in, what your cash flow has been, what your exit multiplier will be, you know, you need to wait X amount more years. Fine. Okay, I will, right? But there is a reason why seller financing makes sense for sellers from a tax standpoint. If you've had a really, really successful year, I had a cash buyer, we play it out, look at the financials, and then look at a seller financing opportunity. My tax obligation is much healthier for me on the seller financing side if I believe in the longevity of the business based on that buyer. Does that make sense? So I have had all cash offers that I did not choose. And I think that is a unique thing here. And it has worked out for me, but why? Because I really believed in my buyer. I'm a big believer in my people. My leaders at 2 of my restaurants came from working the liquor counter and being a cook at B-Dubs, and they have equity in my business now. And one of them is a $2 million business, and one is about 1.7. So these are people with no college education, and they're crushing it, right? So sellers are different, and there's a psychology element, Reed, you mentioned to me. If they're not willing to offer seller financing, and if it would better their tax situation, they may not believe that you're going to be able to keep that business revenue generating and profitable, right? Because there's an advantage to them going this route. So it's an interesting perspective. And the reason I share it is if you are sitting in this audience thinking, I want to buy a business, but I cannot offer cash. I'm getting started. Like I'm not going to be that really impressive, credible buyer. I could see why the maintaining legacy might sound like you're kissing their butt, like, oh, I really love what you've done. I really want to help. And they're like, yeah, you're not real. I can see that perspective, but how about an ego approach? Like, hey, I know you've been really successful. I would imagine that from a tax standpoint, it might be advantageous for you to offer seller financing versus a cash buyer. I assume the cash implications on you being as successful as you've been would be significant from a tax standpoint. So what I could maybe offer you is seller financing. And if that's what's interesting to you and what could save you money on your tax situation, let me build some credibility in why I would be the buyer that would be able to stand by that seller financing and pay you every month and every year as we agreed to now.
Absolutely. And a great thing to add on that too is that we've looked at transactions of less than $5 million, and a bigger driver of the price, bigger than EBITDA margin, is actually the amount of seller financing that a seller takes on it. So you can get them to their valuation number there as well. Larry, you've sold businesses, you're now actively out buying, doing that stuff. With 2020 hindsight, do you think you chose the right buyers? Anything that you would do differently with all these years of hindsight under the belt?
No.
Yeah.
I chose the right buyers.
Yeah.
Got the right deal. Exactly what I expected. And sorry to be short, but
yeah, no, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. But as a buyer,
yeah,
the deal that I did in March, I was restarting. So I'm hitting the ground. I'm meeting a seller. I have to negotiate. I have to sell myself. I have to look for, trigger points that really make him resonate with me. Mm-hmm. And so to kind of flip that question, I was looking for a deal that had a number of different characteristics, but what made me stand out is that I also appreciated the legacy that this second generation family wanted to leave behind, the name recognition, this being a 100-year-old company, right? And the changes that I knew I was going to impose on this business, I communicated very clearly with the seller and had him sign off on those. And so as a buyer, I think how you communicate what your value proposition, your differentiation strategy, the cash that you're going to bring to the table or the lack thereof, right? How that deal is going to be structured, all of the things that you plan on doing with the business. My perspective is I like to communicate that really clearly up front. Right? And I'll tell you this, from a very active buyer standpoint, I think legacy, employees, a number of different characteristics, but those two really bubble up to the top in terms of the importance from a lot of different sellers. So
great. Wouldn't it be great to have Larry in your corner to coach you doing these deals? He's such a wealth of information there. Craig, I'll put the same question to you. You sold the private equity.
Yes.
How has that played out? Is what we hear about private equity buyers actually true? They go in there like RJ Nabisco, gut things. Can you kind of walk through your experience here there?
Our experience was not like that. Again, we picked our firm because we got the most. It really is. You're looking at all your potential buyers are very skilled people, or skilled entities. So they're gonna present different structures to you. So you're really looking at what's the best structure. Some of them may have wanted an earn-out. I don't even really remember. What we got is I still have minority ownership of my business up here in Cleveland. So I'm passive. I no longer run it, but I'm still involved in our next acquisition. I think that at least the first go around when we sold for the first time, it was all new to us. We're dealing with private equity. We had an advisor. I mean, that is a huge thing. You must have that if you're working with private equity on the other side. You got to have a good investment advisor. And my view is no, we were a little concerned about some of our key men, key women employees, but they know they need them. They're not going to be able to run if we walked, they were SOL. I mean, it was, so it's very important. One thing I will say is on the buy side, when we were working with them on the second acquisition we did in Chicago in 21, that was a turnaround. And they handled the financial diligence. Those of us who were within the company running it, we handled the operational diligence of the deal. We ultimately did the deal. It was a great deal in terms of cost. But when we got in there, we realized our Q of E was not well done. And they handled that. And what we found is the pricing that was on the various machine parts that this company was manufacturing was way too low. They were taping dollar bills to boxes. We had to go out and raise prices.
Yeah.
We had big companies, big customers, publicly held, coming at us saying, we're going to just resource. And it was a lot of heavy lifting to get around that. Ultimately, we saved most of that business, and it was a good deal. But looking back, the Q of E was not accurate, and I think that's a critical thing.
And who knows what a QOE is here? What is it, Christian? And what does that mean exactly?
Basically, as a secondary source coming in and confirm the financials and use the financial model.
You got it. Nice job.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Anna, so you help current individuals now that want to buy franchises, correct, as a consultant. Can you talk about what mistakes you see people in that world making when they're thinking about their opportunities?
Yeah, so after 15 years of franchise ownership, I started consulting. Thank you, Reed, for mentioning that. I forgot to mention that in my background. So I help people that are looking to get into specifically franchising, which has its pros and cons. Always happy to talk through those versus independent business ownership or acquisition. There is franchise acquisition as well, but regardless, so I help people looking at getting into franchising identify franchise business models that have viability and availability in their geographical market of preference, but also that align with their financials, their goals, their interests, their backgrounds, et cetera. And the biggest thing that there's probably everybody in here has read the book, The Psychology of Money. I feel like it's just a good, quick read, and it's kind of a fun one. But in that book, there's a quote that basically says, you have to take risk to generate significant wealth, but no risk where you could lose it all is ever worth taking. And so I see a lot of times candidates coming to me with, strong net worths for where they're at in life. Everyone has their own unique and different situation. And I don't care what your net worth is, what your age is, what your background is. I want to help you find a fit that works for you. But I do sometimes see people that want to go all in, the high level of their net worth qualification on a business model. And then that's when I will kind of play that worst case scenario, like God forbid it does not work. Are we losing our home? Okay. Are we losing our car? Are we, let's play that game. And then I'm going to pull you back to something that in the book, The Psychology of Money, they talk about, that really there's a metric of like 50%. So if your net worth is $1 million, we should not be looking at a business that's more than a $500,000 all-in investment. Of course, you're likely only funding 20% of that yourself. But regardless, using that as a basic benchmark, we can get down to 20 to 30% if we're going to be more modest. But as opposed to that aggressive all-in thinking, but then I also respect the individual I'm working with, because there are people that are risk takers, and hey, if that's your prerogative, you might be very successful in that regard. So it's kind of a back and forth. But as long as you understand the level of risk that you're taking, and I had one guy who's like, "Listen, if I lose my house, I'm still in my 30s. I'll live in an apartment. I'll start over. Let's go."
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's do it then. In that case, but you understand your risk and the portfolio risk that you're taking. So
and it's such a great point, because a big mistake that active entrepreneurs make is that they undercapitalize themselves. Right?
Yes.
They're not ready, as the bankers can tell you, for the issues that come post-close. So having that cash buffer is absolutely king. Time for a couple questions. Who's got some? Yes.
Sir, you mentioned you've never regretted picking the buyers you picked. Could you speak to what kind of due diligence you did before you picked them? What was your criteria?
Yeah, so I knew the first acquisition, I knew that when the broker presented a buyer, that we just did not understand the strategy behind what I was trying to accomplish, right? And so the due diligence that I wound up doing later on is, one, very quickly firing that broker. And so I was like, okay, this is not going to work. I'm not interested in a first-time buyer. I need someone with some capital, some skin in the game, and can really appreciate a decent structure. And so what else is out there for me? And I started investigating in my network, my circle, and I came across Evergreen Cooperatives. And so Evergreen does things that are very unique with their portfolio companies in terms of turning them into employee-owned organizations. And I said, that's the path for me. And so I sought them out and called them. But because, when I buy a company, I'm immediately getting it ready for sale. It's going to take years to either develop the tech stack, develop the operating stack, or making sure I have the right management team, making sure that there's no customer concentration. If you just go down the P&L, you go down that balance sheet, it's the same things that during your due diligence in terms of acquiring a business, you're going to look for. And so as an operator and owner, those are some of the things I'm going to be focusing on. So just making sure that, I know I have a legacy business. I know there's a business that's evergreen, that's going to be running a certain way. Who's the right buyer for that business? And because I care about the employees, me doing due diligence on the right buyer is of the utmost importance.
And satisfied sellers do a crazy amount of diligence on the buyers. One deal here from Cleveland, the seller literally flew out here and got dinner with the buyers and the buyers' wives and families to make sure they knew who they were getting in bed with. All right, we got time for one more question. And then we'll have them do their quick takeaways and we'll wrap it up. Who wants a second one? Yes, in the back.
Okay, so my question is similar to the situation with buying a home. Is there a situation in which you could buy a business, operate it for a number of years, realize your heart isn't in it and you don't love it, but you still owe the bank money on it? Can you sell it but you still owe the money on it? I mean, I think the answer is yes, but just to make that comparison to the homes.
Yeah, and feel free to take that.
Yeah, everything's for sale. It's I always have this view that everything in America is for sale. You may not get what you want. You may have some. Certainly you could do that, but you may realize that you're upside down after it's done. It depends on your relationship with your bank or your debt holder. I think when you buy a business, it's a commitment, or start a business, whatever you do, however you get into it. It may not be what you love, but you got to commit to learning as much as you can about it. It may be something you don't love, but I think you have to look at it as if it's profitable, if it's manageable, and you don't love it, you may just have to plow through. That might be the better way to go.
And personal guarantees can be a very motivating thing.
That's true. Yeah,
in our last
that's
couple
the way
minutes
SBA
here.
will be.
So take 30 seconds. Anything that you haven't said that you want to mention so far, and then we'll wrap it up from there. Larry, you want to kick it off?
Sure. I would just say real quickly to that question, as an underwriter for a bank, as well as working on the SBA, the Small Business Administration, I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of deals that have gone south, right? And so those deals may have been under-collateralized or maybe even collateralized correctly, but those deals have gone south. And when you buy a business, it's not like a job, right? You just can't quit that business. Now, you can sell it for a loss, but ultimately you're going to be responsible for that debt obligation if you have debt right? So, real quickly for me, so I was just sitting there a few minutes ago and I was thinking about the who, what, when, where, how, and why. I won't go through all 6 of those, but who.
That's the style.
Yeah, okay. So really quickly, who is you want to understand who the buyers are. So you have financial, strategic, right? And PE firms, right? Those are three large buckets. You might have some family office and some other things, right? So understand who your buyers are. That's the who, because they're going to have different objectives, right? The why is why you are going to be selling, and this is obviously from a seller's perspective, because that's going to command a completely different price premium or a price reduction based on why you're trying to sell, right? When? So you can't time the market from an investment perspective, but you can time when is the most opportune time for you to sell your business. So most investors or most banks, analysts, they're looking for the last 3 years, right? The trailing 12 months is within that last year period. And so you want to look at a stair step. If I'm a buyer, I'm looking at those last 3 periods. If I'm a seller, I'm really focusing on those last 3 periods. You sell up, you're going to get a premium. You sell down, you're going to get a reduction. And the last thing is, let's see, who, what, when, where, and how, and why, right? I'll just leave it at that.
All right, perfect. Anna.
Oh no. Oh, got it. Okay. What I was gonna say is, I feel like hearing it from people like Larry and Craig can sometimes be intimidating for a first-time business owner or first-time business owner to be. No offense to you, gentlemen. But you know, when you have someone who's been doing this and they've had wild success, sold to private equity, bought and sold multiple very, very large organizations, sometimes it feels a little bit intangible or like inaccessible to a lot of us. And so I just want to share a sentiment. Majority of the people I work with as franchise consultant have never been business owners before, either want to get the hell out of corporate America or they were laid off and they're like, this is my sign, this is my time, let's go, and can be really successful in that capacity. And so again, if you don't have the all cash, if you don't have a wildly impressive and significant entrepreneurial background yet, I just want to send a note out to the audience that does not have to be relevant to your success or your likelihood of opportunity in any entrepreneurial venture. I see it all the time. Sometimes those people who have experienced the really hard times in corporate America are the most motivated entrepreneurs. I was more motivated when I got started than I am now, and so keep that in mind. I just like to make sure it feels as just available and accessible to as many people as possible, because I do believe that it is.
And my experience here is I bought franchises when I was 23 years old, and that laid the groundwork for me, a lot of great stuff thereafter. So it's a great low-cost way to get into it. Great communities, great people, great processes. Take us home, baby.
Okay, I'm going to just grab onto something Larry said about the trailing 12, three up or 3 down. That is kind of the way you're looking at things in an acquisition. You're looking at what the trailing 12 was. And one thing I will say is that beware of the 3 down, and the seller, especially in this kind of situation, promise partners, first-time buyers, very often you may have this idea that you're going to just buy this and let it run, but you're probably going to have your hands in there, and you're going to have your hands in there. And if their whole story is, yeah, my EBITDA and my sales have flattened or they've gone down a little, but here's why, and there's so much opportunity here, there's this, that, and the other thing. Everybody's got that story, and even if it's gone up, and they still say that if they want a huge amount of multiple, because they're like, there's all this opportunity. Just beware of that. That's always going to be, typically I've seen coming out of sellers' mouths. And it's part of the emotion, what they perceive the value of their business to be. It's a very emotional thing. And they're selling their baby, and it's a big deal. But you got that as a buyer, you got to keep your eye on that.
Yeah, emotions are a big part of it. All right, Larry wants to say one more thing.
One quick
you
thing.
take us home, baby.
Okay, all right, okay. So I've, as a buyer, really roll my sleeves up and I get busy in the weeds, right? And then I try to put a management team in place to actually run the operations once I understand what the real KPIs or key performance indicators need to be for that business, right? So tech stack, operating principles, understanding who the main customers are, if there's customer concentration issues, supplier concentration issues, suppliers, all that stuff. And so you don't have to be an expert either. You just surround yourself with people who really can help create value opportunities for you. I have a team of advisors that I brought in specifically for my last acquisition, completely separate from my strategic advisors, right? They're deal specific. And so I'm just letting you know that if you're looking for your first acquisition, and I'm playing around the $10 to $15 million revenue standpoint, but I've also done deals much smaller than that as well. But just plan to do some of the work yourself and just don't leave it to chance.
As we like to say, if you're not all in, you're in the way. Give it up for the panel, and I'll give some K2As, and we'll go from there. All right, and they will be available for the rest of this afternoon, so come up and walk to them. And you can reach out to me as well. Last thing I'll say, 3 key takeaways. 1, in these deals, informational asymmetries absolutely run wild. Your truth is not the counterparty's reality. Second thing, a common theme you heard from the 3 of them, particularly Larry at the end, is do you really want to own and operate this business? And secondly, even if you really want to, are you actually credible to, and are you able to? Because the seller is going to be thinking those things, whether or not they say them. Larry is highly intentional who he chooses as his seller or as buyers for that reason. Last but not least, be clear, be consistent, and be concise in your messaging, because all these informational asymmetries do exist. Give yourselves a round of applause, and I'll see you all later.
All right, another big round of applause for our speakers today. Appreciate all your insight. To show the organization's appreciation for their time and insights today, the organization has, on your behalf, made a donation to Owners in Honor, and also have some gifts for you that I will give as soon as I'm wrapped up. Next up, you've got a little bit less than a 20-minute break. Next workshop starts at 2:55, and details for session 3 are on page 11 of your workbook. In this room, we will have a panel discussing leveraging employee ownership in ETA. Appreciate your time and attention in session 2, and look forward to seeing folks in session 3. Thank you.